What is up, heathens? Thank you for joining me today. We are going to be talking with Zack Kopplin about the voucher programs that he's been fighting against in Louisiana for the longest time. The reason why this is really important right now is Betsy Devos, Donald Trump's pick for the Department of Public Education, is in her hearing this week, awaiting to be confirmed for that position. If you guys don't know, Devos is from Michigan. She has implemented many voucher programs in her state, which have resulted in not so favorable results. She has a lot of controversial ideas about public education, one being that she wants guns in schools to protect kids against grizzly bears. Figure that out. But also, she feels that public education, public schools should be used to enhance God's kingdom. She has a lot of religious ideals, and I'm just kind of curious if that is going to be pushed into the public education system. So we have Zack Kopplin here today that has a lot of experience in the field of arguing against this type of person and dealing with these type of politicians. So I hope that you'll give him your attention, and I will see you guys after the interview.
I don't know actually that much about what Devos has personally done in Detroit with school vouchers. But for your listeners who aren't aware of what school vouchers are, basically it's when the government takes money, sometimes through tax credits, sometimes directly from school budgets, from a public school system, and gives it to parents to go spend at private schools of their choice. Now, often these private schools are not teaching science properly. Some of them say, we'll kick you out if you're pregnant, we'll kick you out if you're gay. There's some that ban books that aren't religiously appropriate. And then, of course, my favorite issue, there's a ton that teach creationism. My very favorite examples are a school in my home state, Louisiana, that called scientists sinful men who are just looking to basically get out of morality by explaining the universe. That was what they were teaching their students. And then a school in Florida that called Evolution the Way of the Heathen. The problem is both of these schools were getting public money, and they were teaching this kind of stuff, teaching it to students with public money. Other schools were taking field trips to the Creation Museum, and now something that public school systems do too, but it doesn't make it any more appropriate for a publicly funded private school to be taking kids to the Creation Museum and than it is for a public school. And so it's terrifying to think about our national policy being run like Louisiana. Luckily, there's a lot that states can do to limit the effect that Devos has, but I don't think it will do any good for some place like Louisiana or Texas, which is already headed in this direction and has had these fights for years, to have Betsy Devos be setting national policy too. So what's next?
Well, sticking with the Betsy Devos, I know you said you really didn't have really know a lot about what she's about. Well, you know, one thing that kind of concerns me is the fact that she's not an educator at all. She's more like a lobbyist. And I'm kind of wondering if, considering that inexperience, do you think that she's really fit to, head the Department of Public Education?
I would say that's one of many reasons. And I don't necessarily think you have to, for example, be a teacher in a school to make education policy. I'm not a teacher. I'm not, I don't think I'm ever going to actually go into teaching public school, but I do think it is a bit unusual that she doesn't have kids in public schools, that she has no experience with the system at all. And it does seem like she's never valued it. And you combine that especially sort of with double whammy of religious right, where that's also part of the motivation is, we don't need public schools, we should have religious schools. And that's a concerning thing, that just at a basic foundational level, she doesn't seem to understand. And it's not just her, but there's sort of that axis of public schools to charter schools to vouchers, and the further you get into the full-on voucher camp, the worse, in my view, the policy is. And the less accountability. That's also a separate issue. Is voucher schools have almost no accountability. It's just we give you the money. We'll trust the parents to make the best choice they can. But the problem is most parents aren't educational experts either. I mean, it's no fault of their own, but I mean, you're a parent, and let's say there's a D1 football team at this school, and your kid's a great football player. You may not, and it's a fair judgment to make, which is you may say a poor education with a great football school is a better choice for my kid than a public school without as good of a football program. Now, in many ways, that is a fair judgment, but it doesn't lead to the best educational outcome necessarily. And so and my point, not to bash anyone with saying that, but there's a lot of different factors that go into this. And in the interest of the country, the goal should be creating the best educational system we can that gives our students the best education possible. And so another, of course, some parents want to go to a Christian school. That's another motivating factor. Doesn't mean the school is as good for your kid, but it's Christian. And that's why we have, I mean, that's why we usually have educational experts make these decisions, not individual random parents. That's just something that makes more sense, in my view.
Well, one thing about Betsy that I actually learned today was that she is actually part of the family that started a number of what the Southern Poverty Law Center would call Christian hate groups. Mm-hmm. One of them being the Family Research Council, I believe, was one of the ones that her family kind of founded, or at least started up back in, I believe, the 80s. I'm wondering, do you think that is at all of like concern, like as far as what she could possibly do with the Department of Public Education?
Again, there's always ways for states. I mean, that's one thing. There's always ways for states to sort of smack that down if they want to. But my fear is for places, again, like Texas, which is now, for example, trying to pass an anti-transgender bathroom bill. For places where you have a confluence of right-wing influences, where you have Betsy DeVos on the federal level, who's not putting up any sort of fight against these kind of things, not even speaking out at all because she agrees with them. And then you've got the state saying you can't go to the bathroom in that bathroom that you think is the bathroom you should be in. And no one wants you in the other bathroom too because everyone's just going to treat you bad. Like, there's really no, like, it's like, that's how you hurt kids. And I don't know. I'm really curious actually how her confirmation goes, just because there's been some question of does she even make it to confirmation at all? Just because she hasn't filed all the financial documents she needs to.
I've heard that a lot of the picks haven't done like all of that.
But apparently DeVos is one of the ones who's struggling the most. She was actually, I don't know if you knew, she was supposed to be heard today. And I think she's now been pushed back to the 18th.
Yeah, I think next week is when she's supposed to go up.
Yeah. I guess, I don't know if you'll cut this out or for the record for your listeners, we're talking on Wednesday the 12th, or Thursday the 12th, sorry. So she was supposed to be heard yesterday on Wednesday, which was the initial round where they're going to try and have her ready for Trump's inauguration. But now that's not going to happen for sure because she won't be heard until right before the inauguration.
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm kind of curious. I know that there's some doubt as to whether or not she'll make it up there, but I mean, what do you think based on, her affinity to the religious right and, with her comments about how the public school system should be used to push God's influence in America? I mean, what do you think might happen?
I don't want to. So she's attracted a lot of opposition. I don't want to be too hopeful that she gets shot down, though, just because, I mean, you have someone like Jeff Sessions, who and I don't know how we didn't talk about Sessions, who's been sailing through nomination right now, who yesterday said that he didn't think we find this quote because it was surreal. Sessions.
Yeah, he said that he didn't know if secular minded people could know the truth.
The truth, yeah, which is just, it's something, and he has said he doesn't believe in the separation of church and state in the past, and he's set to become our country's leading lawyer, and doesn't have a basic idea of the founding principles of our country, apparently. And so he's sailing through the nomination process, and he attracted a fair bit of, there was a fair bit of outcry when he was named, not just over his positions on religion. A lot of it was over just the fact that he has had a lot of racism in his past and never really seemed to get by it. Although his argument is basically that he's improved now. But even that has been not enough to stop him. And I'm not confident that Devos could be stopped for the same reasons. I'm more hopeful that something procedural messes her up, like a conflict of interest where she can't get her paperwork in, where she's unwilling to sell off something, and she doesn't actually decide she doesn't want to be Secretary of Education. Something like that could happen. And that, I think, is the best chance to muck up her confirmation, compared to someone like Sessions, who is a career politician and has sort of, even if his views are abhorrent, knows how to get through a confirmation hearing and knows how to file financial disclosure paperwork. Mostly. He only messed up on a little bit. Forgot to disclose oil interest on federal land. But that's only small compared to our president-elect, who maybe, I don't know, has debts to Russia or something. Who knows? We haven't seen any of his tax returns. So,
yeah, which small. I think, he's like the first president in like forever.
40 years.
Yeah. That is not submitted his tax returns for audit, or not audit, but for the public.
Shades of Richard Nixon.
Yeah. I'm kind of curious though, and correct me if you already answered this, but what do you think could be a worst case scenario for if Devos gets in, accepted as the Department of Public Education, head of it? What do you think is the worst possible situation that could happen?
I'm actually not totally sure on that. Because that's the lucky thing, is, again, there's so much more that happens at the state level for education. She could, honestly, just I don't even know how much she could push school vouchers while she's there, which is the lucky thing. It's more of a risk, I think, for school vouchers, that she emboldens the religious right to keep pushing statewide voucher programs. We already have about a dozen states with school vouchers, and we'll see places like Florida's program expand. We'll see places like Louisiana's program expand. We may see one, and I don't know, I don't think we have one in Kentucky yet, but I wouldn't be shocked to start seeing some vouchers there. Texas has been pushing school vouchers for years and years and never successfully created the program. I wouldn't be surprised to see Texas, with her leadership, create an actual voucher program, even though that work would have been left up to the states.
Okay. Well, as far as the voucher programs go, do you think that her being head of it could spawn new programs? I live in Alabama, so we're a very religious state, and I have a 6-year-old son that's in elementary school right now, and I'm just kind of curious if, do you think that it could hasten voucher programs being started up in states that they don't exist now?
Yeah, absolutely. It's definitely a thing where she will embolden members of the religious right. That's unquestionable. And then there is some federal money she could she could use, especially if Congress works with her on vouchers. There's some way she could create more voucher programs or give more money to private schools from the federal government. But I don't know if she could take money explicitly away from the public school system. It probably depends on how their own, and I'm sorry, I haven't actually researched deeply into this, but sort of spitballing here, if you get federal money going to a school voucher system, that then removes public school students from the public schools, the formulas that allocate money to the public schools from the states say, well, there's one less student there, so we'll pull a little bit of money from that. And that is a potential risk. But this is also just me going off how I know things work and not as a complete, as an actual read on how this would work out, just because I haven't drilled into Devos, because that's coming up in a week.
Okay. All right.
But that's my spitballing on how that would work. And I just pulled up a Washington Post piece that was published by Valerie Strauss, who is the Washington Post's ed columnist, who sort of suggests a similar scenario.
Okay.
So if someone wants to go, if your viewers want to go read that, that will have a more in-depth look at what could happen, because Valerie Strauss is pretty good on this kind of stuff. Okay.
Well, I'm kind of curious, since I know that you've dealt heavily with the school voucher system and everything like that in Louisiana, what would be your best advice for anybody that has kids in school and, they may see these changes happening? Like, is there anything that they can do, or anybody that they can alert about it?
They can so the best thing for a parent, I think, besides keep your kid in a good school and do as much as you can to work to improve the school, and make sure, for example, teachers who aren't teaching your kid the appropriate things are getting held accountable in your own public school. Show up at school board meetings. Show up at your state legislature. Call your congresspeople whenever an issue is coming up, because showing up in person or at least making phone calls actually have an impact, because there aren't that many people who do either of those. Make sure you vote is another simple thing. There's a lesson to be learned after this year, since the election was decided by 70,000 people in 3 states. And if people had just gone out to vote, we could have a completely different government right now. The other thing, this is sort of more time intensive, but if you're really into stuff like this, if you have a local voucher program or you have one beginning, you might as well go monitor what the local private schools are doing, especially ones that are getting money. Go see if they're teaching creationism. All this stuff is on their website. They have student codes of conduct. They have their handbooks. They have their classes. They have their teacher sites. It's all online. You go look at it and you see, oh, the school says that we expel students who are gay. That's probably not appropriate for public money. Go figure that out and call your local newspapers. Are easy to access for people. They'll have a tip hotline on their website. Their individual reporters may have their emails on the website, or make a Twitter just for a day. Even if you don't have a Twitter, get on Twitter and go tweet it at the reporter in your local area, because they're going to be paying attention. They'll see this and they'll go check it on the website and they'll write an article about it. And that may keep the school off the list then. No government official, even the most far right ones these days, like a headline that says, like, money sent to school bullying gay kids. Like, that just doesn't look good. And no matter how nasty and far right you are, like, you don't, like, no one really wants that.
Right. And I would also advise that, sometimes you kind of have to read into it a little bit, because they may not be so explicit as we kick gay kids out kind of deal.
Sometimes they are, though. You'd be surprised.
Really?
Yeah. I mean, they never. There's times. I mean, it's like that's the thing I've learned is I've never failed to be surprised at things the religious right have done or said. Um, like my favorite moment ever was at a hearing about a creationism law in Louisiana where one of the state legislators demanded an experiment that proved evolution was real. And then when when the Lenski bacteria experiment, which is basically there's this researcher who for 30 years now has been cultivating E. coli bacteria, and then every new generation of E. coli he freezes a sample, and so now he's got 30 years of sample every week over 30 years. And you can go look back as this E. coli has changed over 30 years and see, oh, look, evolution's happening. And so this experiment was explained to this legislator, and he goes, well, does it turn into a person? And sort of kept on, like, a person, we're talking about evolution, does it turn into a person? Just completely unironically demanding to know whether the E. coli would turn into a person in front of his eyes, which is that beats the guy who accepted creationism because of experience with a witch doctor we had, and also the guy who unironically insisted that we had found Noah's Ark, and that proved creationism was real. These are all politicians in Louisiana sitting up there in official meetings on education policy. So you could, I'd say some of this stuff is like you may have to read into stuff, but you also may just find it plain as day, proudly announced, and it's illegal. It's inappropriate. Schools shouldn't be doing this. The only bad news is that school vouchers, thanks to our current Supreme Court and soon to remain like this ideologically after Trump appoints a new Supreme Court nominee, has said in certain cases vouchers are allowed. I think this ruling's completely cynical. We're basically to say as long as the state doesn't know exactly where the money's going, if you just give parents $6,000 and let them spend it wherever they want, it's okay because you're not giving money to a church.
I don't know. I'd argue that some of these Christian private schools are basically churches.
Yeah. Well, as long as the state doesn't know where the money goes, it's technically okay, is the view. So in Louisiana, our program isn't even legal, though, because the state gives money directly to the schools themselves. And so pay attention to that kind of thing, where the money goes, because there's times where you might be able to shut it down. And I still don't know why Louisiana's program hasn't been sued yet. I'm actually a little surprised. It hasn't been shut down. No one sued it on First Amendment grounds.
Okay. Well, is that just because nobody's willing to stand up and do it, or?
I think so. And no one with the legal standing to. We're just getting into the weeds. Basically, you have to show to have a lawsuit like this that you were actively harmed by the law. And so generally courts don't accept the argument that I'm a taxpayer, and by virtue of being a taxpayer, I've been harmed by this law. A lot of times that doesn't stand up. You actually need to say, my school, like, let me show you how my school was hurt, and this hurt me as a student specifically. And you basically have to be a high school student willing to do that, who have parents willing to do that. And that's a tougher bar.
Yeah. It's kind of tough to ask a kid in a primarily religious state to stand up and, like, be very against the grain.
Even religious or not, just ask a kid to do that. It's really tough.
Yeah.
You don't want to just, like, you want to go hang out with your friends after school. You don't want to go deal with a lawsuit over sort of boring education policy.
Right.
Like, I mean,
well,
that's just.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, I just said that's reality. Like, it's life.
Yeah. Well, I'm kind of curious with the advent of, the religious right taking so much control over the House and just our government in general. Do you think that more things like creationism could be pushed to be taught in public schools?
I mean, they're already being taught. I think we'll see. I don't know. I think they may have maxed out with creationism, luckily, in terms of actual laws, where in Louisiana, we have what's called the Louisiana Science Education Act, which allows evolution, also climate science, to be quote unquote critiqued by teachers in the classroom. So in practice, we found teachers. I got a hold of a bunch of teachers' emails where they talked about bringing the Book of Genesis in to science class to debunk evolution under this law. And so that's what actually happens. This law exists in Louisiana, and then there's a copycat in Tennessee. Plus, there's about 6 states, I think, that have this kind of policy adopted at their state board of education. The largest of which is Texas, and so those all exist, and they allow creations to be taught in public schools illegally, but enough where basically it's sort of a blame shifting thing. Where if you're a teacher in, let's say I'm a teacher in New Hampshire and I'm teaching creationism, and it gets found out, I get in trouble personally. I could get sued myself. Now, if I'm a teacher in Louisiana and I get taught teaching creationism, I say, hey, don't sue me. You can't fight with me. Take it up with the state. I'm just following the state law. And it effectively emboldens teachers to teach creationism. Having said that, according to research from about 6 years ago, that I can't imagine has changed too much, about 13% of teachers was what they found were teaching creationism outright in public schools. And another 60% of teachers in public school biology classes were not teaching evolution properly. Either they were skipping it, or they were teaching both, or they were sort of mangling it, either because they didn't know it, because they'd never taken biology, or had never taken enough biology to understand themselves, or they didn't believe it, or they were just too afraid to teach it and upset families. So they just sort of, for whatever reason, the vast majority of teachers don't teach what they need to be teaching, which means that only about a quarter of American students get the science education they deserve.
Wow.
So that's the depressing statistics on stuff. So laws only embolden it and protect the teachers who break the law, but it's still happening all over. So I'm not sure how much more they can gain. It doesn't help to have the vice president be an evolution denier and the president just not care at all about anything.
No, yeah, and Mike Pence, just to correlate it to Betsy DeVos, he actually has a voucher program in his state where it funnels about $135 million to private, religious schools, where they teach stuff like creationism and whatnot. So,
yeah.
It seems like that there's a lot of support in the government right now for protecting and providing avenues to do those kinds of things.
Yeah. I mean, the only good news is we've slowly been sort of narrowing down their ways to teach creationism. And I think there's been more accountability for individual school districts. I think my favorite school district was this one in Ohio that was it was trying to teach Christian creationism, but accidentally was using materials from Islamic sex cult and just was completely unaware. And so there's this guy called Adnan Oktar who is from Turkey and is known in the evolution world for mailing biology professors his 800-page Atlas of Creation, where he just took pictures of a bunch of animals and took pictures of a bunch of fossils and said, look, nothing's evolved. Including at one point he messed up and included a fishing lure as an animal. He just didn't realize it wasn't an actual animal and was using a fishing lure to try and disprove evolution as one of his pictures. Anyway, he also got in trouble for apparently running a cult where he had people sleep with prominent politicians and then videotape it. Sounds familiar, right? Anyway, he got in trouble for that, but that conviction was ultimately overturned, and he publishes a lot of anti-evolution material that then turned up on this Ohio school district's website, along with stuff from Focus on the Family and the Discovery Institute, which I got a hold of and published, and then now they've deleted it all because they were rather embarrassed. I mean, I felt bad, but it's kind of funny to watch the people who are really anti-Islam and also creationists struggle with what they do about public religion, where we actually had a woman in Louisiana a legislator revoke her support for school vouchers because she didn't realize it would allow Islamic schools to also get public money, and had a big mental breakdown over allowing Islamic schools to get public money. On the other hand, that legislator is still trying to get creationism in public schools, so
it's changed. Yeah, it's funny that they never think about the other religions that exist in the United States whenever they're pushing these things through, because I want to say that there was a different instance as well where they didn't realize that it would allow like teaching of like Islamic creation or whatever. But like they didn't realize that it was going to allow that too, and then they're like, nope, we got to shut this down now.
No, I know it definitely happens. I'm like, well, sir, it's just like you don't realize that like teaching religion doesn't necessarily just mean Christianity. Like when they pass all these, I mean, and the answer is they basically overwhelm everything where the only option is Christianity, and that's a problem. It's what you see with these prayers at public meetings, for example, where it's like you allow everyone to have a prayer, but you make it so only it's Christian prayer because the only people who come pray are Christians. And so it's something that I view as problematic because, what's wrong with having multi-denominational? You can have Christian, Muslim, you can have someone give a secular invocation. Why not? We're a great pluralistic country. It sounds fine with me. But when it's just one kind of prayer, it's a little bit inappropriate, even if there's technically an option for other ones. And then you find a lot of places shut down if there's ever another option. They say, actually, we're not going to do this anymore. So that's always, that I think always exposes the true feelings.
Welcome back, guys. I hope you enjoyed that interview with Zack there. We had a really great conversation. We went on to talk about some climate change stuff, which will be posted at a later date. So please do stay tuned for that. If you're interested in these type of interviews, please don't forget to go down below and hit that subscribe button. I post interviews on Wednesdays. If you have somebody that you would like me to interview, leave their name down below. Let me know who you would like to see on my interview series. Also, as it pertains to this particular interview, I would like to know what you think will happen if Betsy Devos gets confirmed. At the time of this recording, I don't see her doing much except for really bolstering those districts that already want to have vouchers and want to outsource public education to private schools that could possibly teach creationism. I think that could be the ramifications of her getting put into the public education spot, but I would like to know what you guys think. Tell me down below. I would love to read and converse with you guys. Don't forget, guys, be sure to stand up and use your voice in the coming year. We're going to need it in the secular community. I hope you guys have a nice day, and I will see y'all later. I feel like Dwight Schrute right now. Like, bears are a real problem, okay? Bears beats Battlestar Galactica. That's all I need. Where's my yellow fucking shirt at?